Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this online Turps talk. This is the first time that we've ever done an online public talk to a wider audience. So thank you for joining us. We have Jennifer Coates and David Humphrey, who are both based in New York, in Brooklyn, if I am not mistaken. I'm going to very briefly give quick bios for both of you. Please feel free to interrupt me if I say anything that is not factually accurate. Um, and yes, the format for the talk this afternoon will be that Jennifer will speak briefly about her work, then David will speak about his. Then they will both have a conversation between them, and then we'll open it up to any questions that you may have. And yes, this is being recorded, so if you do need to leave before it finishes, you can watch the recording back at a later date. So, Jennifer was born in Surrey in England. She studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art for her BFA and Hunter College in New York for her MFA. She has shown nationally and internationally and currently has a solo show of works on paper at Pamela Salisbury in New York and also has an upcoming solo show at Tyler Park Presents in April. And I suppose you would describe yourself as a painter, writer, teacher, curator, all of the above. And we have David, who studied at the Maryland Institute and New York University, also at the New York Studio School as well in the mid-90s. Um, I read online, and this could be incorrect, but 44 solo shows to date, both nationally and internationally. His work is in the Metropolitan Museum of New York and the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. And he is a painter, writer, musician. I did see, I think, a saxophone earlier off to your right in the studio. And he's represented by, there we go, yes, represented by Fredericks and Fraser in New York. So thank you, I will just say, from all of us at Turps and the wider public who are tuning in for being here this afternoon and talking about your work. And I will hand over to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to just share my screen here. Um, Assuming all's good, you can see that painting. So thanks for the intro, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware, so I'll just mention that David Humphrey and I are married. Um, we have been married for a long time. So I'm going to talk about my work. I'll try to keep it to like 20, 25 minutes and then hand it over to David. So I'm going to start with this painting from 2024. So from last year. It is 6 by 8 feet. So just to show a little bit of the scale, this is what it looked like in a gallery. I showed it last year in a solo show called Edge Effects. And edge effects is an ecological term. It refers to these sort of boundary areas where one ecosystem meets another, and there's kind of more complexity, more life. It makes space for invasive plant species. There's just like a little more flux and chaos. And I found that to be a very generative term for me, thinking about what a painting can be. So there's this word ecotone, and that's an edge effect. And so I was thinking like about paintings as ecotones. So this is a bacchanal scene. And you might know the bacchanal as this kind of drunken frenzy presided over by sometimes by Pan or Dionysus, these nature woodland gods who, sometimes these figures are just depicted like getting drunk and having sex and falling all over each other in the woods. And the way I decided to portray a bacchanal, it's sort of like everybody's in their own world. kind of ghostly, maybe disappearing into the landscape, and think a lot about sort of ecstatic experience and ways to depict that. So I like to think of all of this complexity, different kind of painting moves, exploding outwards, as a a way of imaging ecstasy, and that maybe these people are having a sort of edge experience, an edge effect, like internal ecstasy and falling over and bleeding, dissolving into the landscape. So the figures are their maenads. The female figures which were these mad women that followed Dionysus. And the male figures are goat gods, pastoral kind of satyr. And the plant life along the front are all ditch weeds. They're weeds that grow, plants that grow in poor soil. And my husband and I, David and I, have a place in rural Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of invasives, a lot of weeds that grow everywhere. And I'm a gardener, and to paint the weeds is a way for me to reconcile with the encroaching kind of chaos that's always coming into my little gardens. So I guess in a way I started with this painting because it's large scale, and in a way it's a sort of encyclopedia of all the things that I was interested in, landscape into abstraction, the history of that in Western painting, botany, an interest in botany, so plant specificity along the bottom. There's specific types of butterflies, and then of course the Greek classical mythology. And here's a detail. So you can see Dionysus appears on the surface of these little urns, and there's theater masks strewn around, and just sort of symbols that have been used in a lot of depictions of bacchanals from art history. And I should say I use acrylic paint and spray paint. And there's a sort of plasticity, a kind of synthetic chemical story that is embedded in acrylic and spray paint that informs some of the content of this. So there's a kind of sense of like toxicity, of pollution, that interests me, that these heightened kind of color relationships that are not found in the natural world. And just to show a couple of images from art history. A lot of my work I consider to be like a love letter to art history. So I tend to come back to this oldie but goodie classic Matisse. And just thinking about how other artists channeled heightened ideas of color and these kind of ancient themes. Here's a Poussin painting of a bacchanal that I love, The Triumph of Pan. And you can see there's these theater masks and urns knocked over, and I'm sort of playing with this. And this is another large painting, similar scale, 6 by 8 feet. It's called Diana Nemorensis, which basically is an iteration of the goddess Diana that is associated with the woodland. And Diana herself is she's a huntress, but she's also a friend to wildlife. She's a goddess of fertility. And I tend to return to Diana, to Dionysus, to these kind of woodland gods. And the figure of Diana here, she's taken from a sculpture. And a lot of the times when I paint a figure, it's not a specific figure. It's more like a type from sculpture. So it's meant to sort of make you think about art history and a kind of ghostly, like figure as relic from the past. And the plant life and the little birds, maybe we can get a detail here. It's very specific to our place in Northeast Pennsylvania. So there's these roses that are bound with a wild morning glory bindweed that grows up and kind of strangles the roses. And again, that's me trying to come to terms with the invasives creep into the garden. And the birds, it's a little encyclopedia or index of different kinds of birds that you would find in Northeast Pennsylvania. And again, looking at other versions of Diana the Huntress in art history, I love when she's depicted in the Baroque period with her hounds. Um, and another thing I think about is that the flowers, the birds, the figures, the dogs, they're all like paintings within the painting. So I can kind of zoom in on those dogs and think about abstraction or color field painting, and I can think about the history of marks within painting, and use these as little kind of zoomed in scenes. This is a 5 by 6 foot painting called Herms and Butterflies. And herms are these ancient statues that were found in gardens and in the landscape. They were sort of boundary markers. And again, like how can I depict like an ecstatic experience? For me, it's all about density and light and a kind of centrifugal force exploding energy. And this painting really didn't come to fruition until I put that upside down kind of dive bobbing butterfly over the tops of the plants. And I do again look back the history of painting. This is an ancient Roman fresco, and it's from the House of the Golden Bracelet. And I just think these paintings are amazing because they're kind of a catalog of different kinds of plant life that wouldn't all grow together. There's different kinds of birds from certain regions of Italy that would never all be together. And then the depictions of sculpture, the herms, and these kind of grayed out reliefs that are on top of the herms' heads and the theater masks. And the way these sculptures are depicted, but they're given a kind of humanity, a human presence. So there's an artifice to the way the landscapes are put together, and that interests me. A kind of synthetic collaged sense of the landscape, of taking things from different places and putting them all together. Here's a nice close-up. And this is another painting from my show. So sometimes I like to title them. I give them these long titles. The titles are like lists. And I had been looking at images of archaeological dig sites. So this is dug up heads, wild allium. The allium is the plant. Dug up heads, wild allium, puddling butterflies, I believe is the title of this painting. And this one, it takes some more liberties with the color, I think a little more unnatural, maybe kind of leaning into like a fauve, neo-fauve, neon and neo-fauve. And the allium, sometimes there's like symbolism embedded in the plants. The allium is a wild onion, and it's associated with crying symbolically. The heads are sort of dead, but not really when you look up close to them. Similar to the way the herms are painted in the ancient frescoes, they have an otherworldly kind of life to them. So they're disembodied and they're relics from the past, but they have a kind of breath to them. And these gatherings of butterflies that I love to depict, and again, butterflies like a painting within the painting. I had learned that butterflies are actually totally disgusting creatures that extract minerals and salts from rotting matter. So they tend to gather at mud puddles, or they feed on corpses of dead animals, or blood, or tears, or poop. So I love this idea, again, like this sort of ecstasy and rot working together in a painting. And I also love this genre of Dutch Baroque painting called forest floor still life. So again, just a reference for me about an artificed landscape. So these paintings would take insects, reptiles, plant life, mushrooms, all kinds of things that would never be found together especially not on the forest floor. So it's almost like a cabinet of curiosities, a collection of it's like a scientific collection, but also a kind of art, an artist collection. Here's another recent painting. It is also 5 by 6 feet, and yeah, this one it's meant to be a yew tree, that yellow tree. The poppies and the yew would never really grow together. The leopards are a symbol of Dionysus. There's a head down there in the middle. Oops, here we go. Another one of the dug up heads, and the butterflies are gathering and puddling around the head, extracting minerals. And, I'm thinking about the symbolism of the yew tree in England. As you said, I was born in England, particularly interested in some of the symbolism, pagan symbolism associated with these ancient yew trees. And of course, the opium poppy has like a sort of sedative, narcotic, meaning to it. And yeah, so here are some depictions of the leopard carrying Dionysus, and an image of a dug up head found in a Roman sewer of Dionysus from a sculpture. And I went back last summer to England and got to visit the town that I was born in. And I don't have any memories of it because we left when I was like 2 years old, or maybe a little younger. But apparently, my father used to take me for walks when I was little in this wood across the street from the little house that my parents lived in. And he called it the conference tree. And we were able to find the exact tree in the woods. And I had been interested in yew trees for the couple of years before I visited it. It was really kind of amazing. We all decided that somehow, this experience in the woods in Surrey implanted in my unconscious. And I like that idea. So I'm going to show a couple drawings. And I sit in my garden. This is drawn last summer. I had some poppies growing, and I'm working on this paper called Yupo paper, which is a very smooth surface. It's made from recycled plastic. It's a very weird surface. It's not porous at all. So I often start with these spills on top of the paper, let it take a long time to dry, but it creates these cool kind of puddling, reticulated areas. Sometimes I put two wet pieces of paper together, and that's a surrealist technique called decalcomania. And the surrealists would use these kind of charged grounds to see into and tease out information. And I just like to use them as these generative grounds for drawings. Here's another drawing from my garden. Again, drawing the weeds, the wildflowers mixed with weeds. I have these beautiful old 19th century sort of leftover from farmland, these sort of ruins of rock walls that I've become obsessed with as a motif. And I have some animal skulls hanging around the studio, and I always thought, oh God, well, like I can't put a skull in a painting. That's just too, I don't know, goth or something. But I allowed myself to draw them and incorporate them in the manner of the forest floor still life. Here it is situated amongst the weeds and some petunias from my garden. I didn't see these mushrooms, full disclosure. I did look up some mushrooms online. I do incorporate a lot of Google image search results in my paintings. So again, it's like part of that artifice thing. And I think that I'm sure many of you, like me, have on your phone all these open tabs of images that you may have searched for. And that's like my collection. That's my the poor man's cabinet of curiosities, I call it. yeah, some sculptural figures in the landscape, a kind of pretty toxic creek there. And we were in Greece. We were in Greece a little over a year ago, and I brought some of the grounds on Yupo with me to do some drawings. And this is a pretty good example of the hybrid landscape. So I came with the ground I had done in Pennsylvania. I sat in a park in Athens and drew what I saw, and then brought the drawing back with me and filled it in the foreground with plant life from back in Pennsylvania again. This is sometimes I work just in black and white. So here's a pretty it's a clearer version of what can happen in these grounds when I press the wet pieces of paper together. And this one I did in Greece also. I was thinking about these ancient Greek and Roman seers. There was a category of divination called haruspicy, where you would read the entrails of bulls and rams and sheep. So that's what this is. She's a haruspics. And I'm going to be wrapping up in the next couple of images, but another drawing that went on quite a journey from a ground in Pennsylvania to Greece, drawing heads from museums, from sculptures. And I brought it back. I didn't know how to finish it until one day last summer, the power company came by unannounced without permission and dumped a whole bunch of chemicals on the edge of our property. So my studio is situated right at the edge of the property, and I draw these gnarly old apple trees and kind of brush and undergrowth and weeds. And I noticed they were all dying, and I was really, really angry. But then I just sat down in front of them and realized, okay, this is part of the story of my work. There's rot, there's toxicity, you know. I'm trying to document the quote unquote natural world as it kind of disappears in front of our eyes in some cases. Um, Another work on paper. This one's in my show right now. So you can see again those ruined rock walls. There's some little figures in the back there. And this is a drawing from England from last summer. I went with David and my family to Cornwall. And I love Cornwall. I've been there a couple of times now, and I've become obsessed with these. This is from an Iron Age settlement ruin. And there are these little caves, these little portals that you can hunch down and walk through. They're called fogus. And people don't really know what went on inside the fogu, but I just love it as a portal into the earth. So I did this drawing while I was on the train coming back from Cornwall to London. Here's an image of it. Pretty accurate. Come on, I think. And I saw something called a wish tree, this witchy looking tree that I learned subsequently. There are trees near these ancient well sites that people bring, rags or knickknacks or hair ties and attach them to the trees. And they're supposed to be like prayers or offerings. And I think of them as a kind of modern, contemporary votive. And I have subsequently taken the idea home to the studio. This is from the fall. It's a wish tree inspired by the Iron Age settlement that I visited called Carnuni. So a lot of I'm probably saying that wrong. A lot of the plant life in this painting is there's crocosmia, which is a wild iris. Those are the little orange plants. And then there were these dead, beautiful foxgloves, these sort of architectural projections coming out, and then the ferns and the ivy. The ivy's an invasive. But I decided, like, wow, the wish tree is just such a great motif. It's a way to have the paintings within the paintings. It's a way to sort of reference things that maybe are a little more contemporary for me, which is new. although spray paint is pretty contemporary. And I'm really in this zone of this is a painting in progress. It's getting there. It's going to be in my show in LA. So we've got the Fogu, the portal, the rock ruins, hybrid plant life. There's stuff from Pennsylvania and stuff from Cornwall mixed in together. And I like the idea of the act of painting being votives, offerings, like the painted mark and the votive tied to the tree, where, a votive is a way for a human to communicate with something they can't see in with a sort of sense of hope or possibility. And I think that's what we kind of do as artists, as painters. And this is a little guy, little starling, in a kind of intimate forest scene. And I'm just going to end with this word, necropastoral. So I'm taking a writing class right now. It's called Writing the Necropastoral. And this is a term that was coined by a poet about 10 years ago. Her name's Joyelle McSweeney, in case anyone wants to look her up. She's brilliant. And, the necropastoral is sort of exactly what it sounds like. And, taking a walk in an urban place it's the necropastoral is everywhere, kind of decay and cast off objects and and magic also. So my studio is in a very industrial area of Greenpoint in Brooklyn. So taking this writing class really wakes up my sense of place. And of course, the necropastoral creeped its way into rural Pennsylvania as well in the form of the power company and their horrible chemicals. And this is my final image on the street where my studio is, Greenpoint Avenue. And it kind of summed up everything that I'm into. You've got the drawing line with the spray paint, and then the drawing line of these vines, invasive vines in winter, kind of doodling and meandering around. And then there's also barbed wire in there. So there's the natural world, there's the kind of industrial world, and the human hand all echoing each other and rhyming each other and sort of drawing the necropastoral. And that's me. And we are going to move into David Humphrey, the wonderful artist. Thanks for listening.
Huh. Well, thank you, Jennifer Coates. I'm hoping that the shadow of the necropastoral will kind of be cast across all of my images. And I will just go straight in. I mean, I like the idea that somehow this whole talk is really a sort of way to just show the images. But I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to go all the way back and start with paintings I made as a 20-something in the mid-1980s. And I thought of this one would be a kind of not a bad origin story, because it's kind of embryonic and maybe has folded into it some version of like the Garden of Eden, and maybe, George Washington chopping down the cherry tree, some conflation of different origins. And it's written down there, Felix Culpa, which is kind of a funny, sort of heretical.
I'm sorry, I can't see your screen. Can you?
Oh,
Yeah, it's not.
here, I'm talking about this painting.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we go.
Thank you. Interrupting me. Here it is. Felix Culpa, Origin Stories. Wow, that was funny. Yeah, I wonder how those sentences make sense without the image. Anyway, here it is, the embryonic beginnings of my career from my first show in the 80s. It was a funny moment because painting when I was a student in the late 70s, early 80s, didn't seem like painting was that cool of a thing to do. There were a lot of painters, plenty of work going on, but the cutting edge galleries had other interests. And then somehow some force of maybe it's like the combination of a kind of collapse of the avant-garde and a kind of emergence of new energies with younger artists, but it sort of 80s painting exploded, and I feel like we're still rolling. But I'm going to kind of move very quickly. Like here's a painting from the early 90s. I kind of started to bring in more kind of photographic imagery. I realized that maybe one thing that painting is really good at is speaking to aspects of memory and consciousness. And so somehow I thought that photography has in some ways inflected the way we remember. And in my own case, I had photographs that I had taken as a kid. And so I kind of folded that in. It was almost kind of like sort of collaborating with my childhood photographer self to make a new painting and tell new stories that would somehow build on and elaborate that material. I guess maybe in a way, like I think of fiction writers who maybe kind of include real people or remembered material into the fabric of a fiction. So at some point in the mid 90s, I started to I discovered a trove of photographs of my parents' wedding, and I thought, well, okay, let's push it a little bit further back, and I kind of treated them, like the kind of spaceman anthropologist looking at the peculiar mating habits of white people in the mid 20th century. But then I could kind of tell new stories with them. I could vandalize them. So that's my father. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
So that's my mother in the middle. So this one's called "My Mother Speaks to Her New Brother-in-Law, Who She Loathed." But here they are at the wedding. So it's a kind of an origin story of family romance. And this is maybe a 8-foot, 9-foot painting. But then I kind of started to move away from that and start to look at more kind of vernacular imagery um, and telling different sorts of stories about consciousness, memory, longing. And then so these are all oil paintings. Somewhere around 2000, I decided I was kind of a little frustrated with the kind of associations of oil paint and then sort of maybe under the influence of my almost new wife, Jennifer Coates, that maybe acrylic would be something worth trying. And I kind of like the initial kind of disorientation. I love that it dried so quickly. I love that somehow the whites were kind of brighter and cleaner and more plasticky. And so I kind of started to do a bunch of paintings with acrylic. So this one I have paired with that one just because it's sort of about pairs, twins, something like that. So basically I'm gonna kind of rip through like 20 years with like just a handful of paintings, somewhat arbitrarily selected, partly because I find them amusing or interesting. And maybe there's a kind of a thematic connection between them, thinking about reflections in pairs, sort of like formalism exercised in kind of American vernacular imagery. So like this painting was inspired by this painting was inspired by a painting of a snapshot of somebody's child with their dogs. And I just thought, oh my God, this is kind of funny, kind of weird. This is another kind of very large painting. But I guess I'm kind of interested in the idea of like maybe interspecies connections as a kind of a way to tell stories about intersubjective connections. That we tend to kind of have longing for attachment and attachment to others that we don't always necessarily understand or know. And sometimes I would have like maybe interspecies connections, but also maybe even inter pictorial, or like a relationship between different languages. So like the yellow horse is one kind of flat language, and then the red horse is a different one. But here they are kind of connecting, and you can sort of see a little bit of warmth there, kind of glowing at the moment, at the point of contact. Um, so I'm kind of scrambling, and these are not in any kind of particular order, but sort of jumping between works made in the last 15, 20 years. Um, but I love the idea of the spaceman. I kind of invoked it earlier. Basically the being who's kind of wandering into a new place, not quite understanding what's going on, but maybe but very watchful. And so in a way standing for like the spectator, like that the spectator has a kind of surrogate presence inside the picture. But here's the overturned cement truck that somehow spills color onto the road, which is itself kind of painted also. And so maybe sort of thinking about the painting itself as a sort of a site of collision, disaster, and maybe to invoke Jennifer's term, the ecstatic. That like I guess the idea of the ecstatic is to get outside of oneself, and the idea that the truck as a kind of entity is leaking its contents in the form of a kind of abstract painting. This one's called Chimera, and I realized at a certain point that I loved gestural painting, um, and that I had somehow like never done it. It never felt like it was me quite. I didn't have it in me. Didn't have that kind of confidence and show-offy bravura. But then I realized, well, I could just perform that as if I was that artist, and then make a painting in which I could then actually I could be a variety of roles within the making of the painting, and that could be a sort of a generative fiction. And so I would, this is like maybe an 8-foot painting, and I would get ready, and I got my big brooms and had the paint mixed up, and these are acrylic, so it would happen in like a minute or two. And then I would spend a month sort of collaborating basically with that kind of material. I came up with this. So, oftentimes I would find content inside of it and then groom it into new images. And in this case, the chimera with his curly hair is a sort of composite of like letters and forms and body parts. Here's a painting I made of Jennifer Coates. I don't know, Jennifer, I don't know whether to tell the story of the origin of this painting, but it was a kind of I like the idea that you make a painting of a closed door, and that part of the content of the painting is what is happening on the other side of that door. So Jennifer, at one point, we were at the American Academy in Rome, and she heard voices talking about us on the other side of that door. And so she goes up to listen. Anyway, she got caught, and it was sort of a kind of a fan, caught by somebody else saying, no, 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 don't do that. But I like the image, and one of the things I liked about this image is like her feet, her taut, bare feet that are kind of have all this energy in them, elevating her into the listening. This is not a very good image. This is called Shopping. It's kind of the helpful husband rendering an opinion about whether the partner looks good in that dress. This one's called Plumbing Bill. And I loved actually making a painting in which this bill in the lower right corner is a very accurate representation of a bill that actually functions as a bill. You can, the phone number of the plumber is on there. You could call him if you wanted a job done. I'm not sure that, this painting has a job for him, but it's another kind of personification of ass, I guess, as two kind of modern art faces. Here comes some more I call it intersubjectivity. Um, like there's somehow the connection between these two entities is the crux of the painting, but then the painting somehow goes into this like other kind of abstraction of kind of velocities and speeds that kind of elaborate, but then run past the kind of psychological content of these beings. I read a very beautiful fragment of oh goodness, who is the classical poet on the island of Lesbos? Jennifer, you can help me. God damn it. What's her name?
Sappho.
Sappho. That's funny that I didn't remember. I think that must be some parapraxis. Anyway, Sappho wrote this poem in which she observes a girl that she has desire for laughing in conversation with somebody else. And Sappho is kind of overcome with jealousy. And I love this idea of like what observing somebody else laughing. But in this case, we're not sure that the laughter of the person in the bathing suit is kind of at the joke of or in defense against the person she's with. More forms of intersubjectivity. I think in this one, I was thinking maybe it was like somebody being pickpocketed or, but there's a kind of an aggressive connection between those shadowy figures on the left side. But then they become kind of fused into a new hybrid entity in which their conflict emerges as a new kind of whole in this kind of weirdly psychedelic urban landscape. But I make sculpture sometimes, and I like having sculpture in paintings. I mean, in exhibitions with paintings. This is a sculpture of a wave. Here's a sculpture from a few shows ago. I like somehow that it merges with the painting behind. Somehow having a sculpture in an exhibition of paintings has the effect of somehow linking the ambient spectator with the architecture of the room and the imagery inside the picture. And I kind of, I like that. And then the painting behind is of two people kind of posing for a camera so that they are both being observed and observers inside the picture. So this might be tipping toward the necropastoral. I did a series of works based on snapshots in my neighborhood in Long Island City that I had printed out on large pieces of vinyl, like 7 feet by 5 feet, which I then kind of painted on top of, kind of vandalized, interacted with. I mean, and here in this case, it's like the mud smeared road. The mud smeared painted road is already a kind of story about painting in a kind of dystopian industrial space, which then could be a jumping off point for making this painting. And here's a few others. Here's painting on a snapshot of a sculpture, which is in a weird way to kind of enact the fantasy I have about the way sculpture can interact with paintings. And here's a sculpture actually leaning into one of those printouts, and the printout is itself a kind of an image of a drawing. kind of blown up large. So, I mean, I think of this as in a way as a spectator observing a painting as a sculpture. Anyway, it's I guess maybe what I'm saying is that I like scrambling the terms, maybe creating feedback relations between the reproduced, the authentic, the photographed, the remembered, the imagined, um, as a way to kind of maybe get at something about consciousness, maybe consciousness in images, consciousness in behavior, consciousness as it bears in matter. I actually have a painting. Here's a spaceman on a small painting, then uh, pinned to a vinyl. So it's called Proud Sculptor. Okay, I'm going to race through a bunch of images here. I guess I'm thinking about sleep and maybe sloth and mess as a kind of form of resistance in a kind of totally instrumentalized world in which every moment of kind of attention and wakefulness is, monetized. Sleep seems like the most, dramatic and kind of effective form of resistance. Okay, I'm going to read something. I did a series of paintings of police and demonstrators, and I wrote a press release. This is like in maybe 2017. It was during the pandemic. No, so that would be 2019.
It was 2020.
And 2020. Thank you. And recently somebody is curating a show called Authority Problems, and they quoted my press release, and I went back and I read it, part of it, and I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. So it says here, authority's gesture, the task of the violence worker, police, is to neutralize agency, to stop a person in their tracks, to arrest their ability to move. The cop's task is to produce and distribute violence in the name of order. But the disorder that results often serves authorities' purpose just as well by proving the necessity for increased state violence. What kind of power can a painted image have? Like the police, a painting arrests motion, but in the service of poetic freedom. The application of an abstracting, formalizing artifice can produce both a reflective distance for the viewer and an intense embodied presence that challenges detachment. A space is provided for sustained associative regard and a charged urgency. Some of these works fuse militarized police with neutralized citizens into a monstrous hybrid, a dynamic liquid whole in a space littered with trash and painterly effect. So that's that. It was kind of weird and fun to read those words in relationship to this painting. Anyway, this last little bit here is from my previous show. And I think we're running to the end, and I was just going to switch over and show images from my show that just came down because it ends with a little curatorial project that I did, that Jennifer Coates did with me in that show. So this is the show in the front room, series of new paintings. I collected it's called portraits. And so in some way, each of these images is presented as if it was a portrait. But of course, it's a kind of, if it is a portrait, it kind of understands selfhood or personhood or the subject of the portrait to be an assemblage, to be a kind of a composite made of heterogeneous parts that maybe speaks to the incoherence of self, or maybe self as an assemblage or a retrospective fiction, which I kind of like. Here they are, moving through all of these. And then here we come into the back room. This was, and I'm just going to preface it, and this will lead into our conversation. Jennifer proposed to the dealers uh, to that they should make a show that shows some of the energy of my studio, which includes lots and lots of drawings and sculpture and various things, to get at maybe some of the way I think about making imagery. And they said yes. And so she selected sculptures, paintings, drawings, and organized them into this whole. And so, in fact, there's me taking a nap right on that couch over there. There's my saxophone based on a prompt by her. And here it comes. So some of these are grouped thematically. Some of the themes emerged after the installation. And maybe Jennifer, this is a time to bring you in. Do you want to talk about any of these things?
Yeah, maybe go back to the image right before this one. Um, can you zoom in on that a little tiny bit, that wall? Is that possible? Yeah, a little more. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I laid out all the drawings. David let me sort of plunder his studio, and I picked just like, I don't know, I want this, I want this, I want this. I sort of had a general sense of what I wanted, but without really knowing what the install would be like. The idea was to show the energy and the crazy exuberance of his studio, as a context for the painting, for the room of paintings up front. And this was the wall of institutional despair. So it's sort of people, waiting, or in a cubicle, or waiting for a doctor's appointment, or what's that one up in the left, mopping, and mopping the floor as abstract painting gesture, and these kind of animals with like the animals are very soulful, that the ape and the wolf. Yeah, I think that was my favorite theme, institutional despair. But there was like guys eating snacks and sculpture propping up painting. And yeah, I wanted David to make a self-portrait of the truth of what happens in the studio, and in after lunch, when you're kind of dwarfed by your own ambitions and you're like, I don't know. But then you take a nap, and this is, going back to ancient times, there was incubation, dream incubation, where people would go and practice kind of sleep as a way to like reset and kind of use that dream space as something generative. So I love this painting, just want to say. But maybe we could open it up to Scott, if you have anything you'd like to mention or ask, or
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the two presentations. Lots of interesting crossover. If anyone else has got a question that they want to ask, either David or Jennifer, just put it in the chat and I can ask it on your behalf.
I'm trying to get out of the screen sharing
just
here. I'm sorry.
David, put your cursor at the top of your screen and it'll light up, and you can click stop share. Do you see that?
There it is. Thank you.
Sure.
Another example of collaboration there between the two of you. So, the first thing I'm going to ask you, just because of the nature of the conversation that we've had, is do you both enjoy talking about your own work?
With each other?
With each other, independently? Is it something that you look forward to? Is it something that you don't look forward to? Do you have certain things that you always tend to say, which you feel are sort of core principles of the work?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it helps to write about the work. You know, I think David and I both share this, that we tend to draft up our press releases for our shows. And that can help solidify. I think teaching helps you solidify what you have to say about work generally. And that for sure at the end of the day, we talk about two things: painting and tennis, because we're both obsessed. We're both very I don't know, not self-hating, but we're very serious about our tennis game. So we'll show each other paintings, well, things that are in motion in the studio, but also act out. Like here's what I'm really going for with my forehand. Um, David.
Well, that's funny. I mean, I find that when I talk about my work, I go into a fugue state. And so I don't really quite know what I'm saying. And I tend to kind of riff off the images. And so it'll be later on that I think, oh, I forgot to talk about my core principles or the thing that I really am going for. But that I do some teaching. I mean, I graduate teaching, which is not really teaching so much as it is a kind of conversation with people about their work. And that often in those conversations, I will stumble upon the very core principles that I forgot to mention in the talk. So for instance, with Jennifer, like we've been having conversations about our work for 20 years. So in a way, we never need to kind of talk about our core principles. I mean, is that true? Like they're sort of assumed, and maybe this is true of any kind of interlocutor who you've been conversing with for a long time. You sort of go to like new material and testing out how we feel about new material more than kind of establishing foundations, because that's already so assumed.
Yeah, so the necropastoral is new in our household, a new term to kind of, I don't know, order our thoughts, disorder them about painting right now.
Yeah, I mean, once upon a time we worked through, like I'm thinking about Timothy Morton. Okay, so it's Timothy Morton and in his book Hyper Objects sort of talks a lot about um, ecology, the end of nature, and he invokes these three terms: lameness, weakness, and hypocrisy. And I feel like we kind of worked through that at a certain point. Like he almost kind of says that these are the universal conditions of being a person in a state of ecocide, something like that. You start your car, it has no measurable effect on the ecology, but indeed it reflects lameness, weakness, and hypocrisy. And maybe, being an artist under in these moments, we have to kind of think about our weakness. I'm thinking we worked through that once upon a time.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not very inspirational and a kind of Turps banana. Um,
Yeah, how can we really issue a rallying cry to everybody?
I think you just did. I think that was your presentations that you both gave. That was the rallying cry. So how does it do you work in the same studio building or complex, or do you have separate studios? And then do you invite the other over to talk about the work, or do they just sometimes show up and offer their unsolicited opinion?
Well, it's two different situations. In the city, we work, I'm in Greenpoint, which is 20-minute walk, 30-minute walk south of our apartment. And he's a little further north in Long Island City in Queens, 15-minute walk in the other direction. And we don't really go to each other's studios that much in the city, but we always are showing each other images. But in Pennsylvania, we're right. I'm in a garage, converted garage, and he's in a barn, and I sneak up on him by a lot. I try to announce my presence. hello, here I am. But somehow I always seem to scare the crap out of him. But we are in each other's studios like all throughout the day, every day when we're in Pennsylvania, and it's really wonderful. And I miss that during the year. I do.
We have there's like two moves. One move is you will say to me in front of the painting you're working on, what does this need? And so, then I'll have to come up with something. And I feel like the version of your helpfulness in my studio is saying, I'm not feeling it. It's not enough. And I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Of
I
course
know.
it's enough.
I joked to someone that you, whenever you come to my studio, you're like, it's done. Don't touch it. I'm like, what are you talking about? And when I come to your studio, I'm like, you need to bust out that little brush and really get in there. And, come on, you can paint a microphone better than that.
I have a little bit in me is jealous of a certain strain of German painting
Mm.
in which there's this kind of throwaway gesture, this kind of I don't mean it sort of anarcho-punk um, kind of dare, like I dare you to think there's anything here. This is so crappy. Or as, Kippenberg would say, crappy just so. And Jennifer does not share that.
No.
And maybe I don't actually have it. It just looks kind of cool from my chatty American distance. And maybe it's not cool anymore. Maybe it used to be cool. And maybe even German artists don't do it anymore. Maybe Michael Kreber does it.
I gave up on thinking about what's cool a very long time ago because I have no idea. No idea.
Well, that's so cool, Jennifer.
No.
One thing that struck me with the presentations, and maybe this is also because I know a little bit about your work from before, Jennifer, you tend to work maybe more in series. David, you perhaps don't. You think you use the word sort of scrambling, maybe not in relation to that, but just there's much more of a kind of moving between things. Maybe there are ideas that appear and then reappear later on. But whereas Jennifer, I know you did a body of work that was focused on food, and now you seem to be focused on this new branch of
Yeah.
painting.
For,
And
for me, I need terms. I need a motif or an ensemble of motifs. I need to know where I am, and then within that, anything's possible. I like to kind of really play with my painting approach and what a mark can be given the materials that I use. What's legible, what's not legible, a continuum of legibility. But like I can't I need a constraint. It really just helps me. The constraint liberates me. So yeah, I do tend to hook into certain themes and play them out for as long as I find it
I mean,
exciting.
the cool thing about what you do in that respect is that you could also you then underwrite those coherent themes with research.
hmm,
And
Right.
so you kind of fill it out very solidly and deeply with, humanities studies, with history. Um, whereas I tend to be a little more anarchic, but but I feel like the whole of the studio moves along like a weather system, and that there is a sort of shared life that all the heterogeneous parts um, participate in, and that stimulates each other, so that there are kind of threads that could be kind of organized into coherent bits, but that the very turbulence of it is generative for me.
hmm. And I guess that goes back to what you were saying before about how you tend to collaborate with your younger self. So there's this dialogue that's happening with you across sort of time and space, and
Right.
That's
Or
one of the
even,
best things that you ever said. That's like my favorite thing you ever said is that you could put something away and then you pull it out and you're collaborating with an earlier version
Mm.
of yourself. I just find that so helpful.
And I guess, maybe there is some kind of notion of selfhood itself as a kind of, heterogeneous array of memories and, qualities of being alive in which things that are not you are always being uh, kind of navigated and situated within this kind of assemblage. And I think that painting can get at that in kind of profound ways and maybe even, tease it out or vex it or, apply pressure to it um, in ways that are kind of unexpected and alive.
Mm. And do you ever think about your future self collaborating with you now?
Ah, that's a nice one.
I
Yeah, always.
if only I believed there was going to be a future, I would think about it. Not that
Well, this
much.
this
I
kind
guess
of
that
touches upon what we were saying before the conversation started about how in the past artists were speaking to the future, and now perhaps there's more of this idea that we're speaking to the dead, to the void.
I mean, your impulse is exactly the same as mine to bring the necropastoral back into this. But the curious thing about the necropastoral, it does seem to be very, like preoccupied with ruins. And of course, the pastoral itself is a kind of antique idiom in which, shepherds and animals and plants all kind of harmonize with each other. But the necropastoral, I feel like, by introducing, like, say, putrefaction or decay, has within it a certain kind of different future. Like
Mm.
putrefaction is a kind of a form of growth in a way. It's a kind of a negative growth.
Yeah, like a compost pile, sort of. I like thinking about compost these days in relation to painting, like a pile of marks that eat each other and erase each other, but sort of hopefully accumulate into something generative. But yeah, the pastoral, why was it so Arcadian and bucolic? It was only because it was in comparison to, you know, the urban and the not peaceful, which was it's an opposition that already existed, right?
And it's so
And
interesting to me that in the kind of classic moment of innovative modernism, and I'm thinking about that Matisse painting you showed, and some of Picasso and a lot of the divisionists used the pastoral, which was an absolutely old-fashioned, highly conventional form to exercise these experiments. And I find that kind of curiosity, like that they would that they would use as a platform something so not innovative.
well, I guess it's like I mean, I thinking about which images to choose for today. I didn't include a couple, based on that Poussin painting, that Bacchanal, which is based on, ancient Roman sarcophagus, like, Bacchanal processions, ancient representations. And then artists in the 20th century looked back to Poussin. So there was like Picasso did a version of the Triumph of Pan. Leon Kossoff did Prince. Bob Thompson made Triumph of Pan. So the idea that you revisit the classical at different stages from different points of view, it's sort of material that's in the commons. You could be from anywhere, and you're not going to be accused of appropriation if you're drawing on classical anti mythology and images from antiquity, and it serves a different purpose, like in terms of the sociocultural moment that you're in. Like, it says something different, and it's a motif to return to with different different values and different things that you're trying to disassemble, knock down, undermine, idealize, right?
Funny, I feel like a lot of people are kind of wondering about like what happened to postmodernism. Like there was postmodernism, which was sort of in some ways promoted a kind of recombinant, kind of hybridizing, patchwork of different historical material, and now it's like somehow that seems in the past, and like what you're describing is like a kind of meta modernism, or somehow like sort of rooting deeper into those modernist precursors for something new and innovative, and maybe
Dripping with authenticity. Isn't that what you said?
yeah. Well, I mean, I like the idea somehow. I mean, maybe this is a legacy of my post-modernity, is that I like the idea of making works that are ironizable. No, they're not ironic,
Hmm.
and they're not dripping with authenticity, but they're ironizable
And
if you
and
so
I
choose.
I just like feelings.
Yeah, but I don't like your feelings.
I don't like yours, but I like mine.
So is there, I
Well,
mean, just
is it time for us to open up to some questions from our audience? I don't even
yeah, I
know
mean,
if
if anyone's got a question, please do put it in the chat.
Please
If
excuse
not,
our marital banter.
no,
so.
this
Do
this
you
is
know?
everyone's here for the marital banter.
But are there
Um,
people actually tuned in? I mean, I have no idea.
it could just be us, just
Could be
Oh,
just
three
here's
of
us
a
three,
us
right?
question.
talking at
I
each
see a
other.
question.
There is a question that has come in, and this is to both of you. What artists, contemporary or otherwise, have inspired or influenced you? Or are there artists whose work you just love? And Jennifer, you did mention the Poussin, and there was the Matisse painting. Um,
Take it away, Humphrey.
Okay. I mean, I think there's a lot of really wonderful contemporary artists. I think it's kind of like these are sort of horrible times, and there's a lot to complain about with regards to the art world. But I feel like there's just a lot of very interesting, cool work being made now. Who am I thinking of? I mean, just like randomly popping into my head, I'm thinking of like Rachel Harrison or um, Dana Schutz, or I know Amy
Lisa
Silman is doing
Sandit.
some cool
We
things.
love Lisa Sandit's
Lisa
painting.
Sanditz is doing really cool things. Like Neo Rauch is always impressive to me. I mean, I don't think I like him as much as I did at first, but like what a powerhouse of accomplishment and kind of pictorial innovation. I don't know. There's a lot of, I mean, here you are, Turps Banana. You guys are in the business of like cultivating new painting, right? It's all painting at Turps, right?
yeah,
Or do
so
you have
that's the ethos of Turps as painter to painter, and that carries on across the magazine, the art school, the gallery. So it's painters having conversations about painting with other painters. Well, the caveat to that is that there is also mass, which is for sculptors. So that's the other side of things, which launched a couple of years ago. But yeah, I mean, I think that perhaps came out of this dissatisfaction with what things were like in the UK, particularly in terms of the art school and arts education, and how for a while you were maybe wanting to make paintings, but you were in a room with photographers and sound artists and installation artists, and your tutor, teacher may have been an academic, a writer, historian. So the conversations that painters want to have and maybe need to have, there wasn't a space for that to happen. And hence,
there is
Turps
a sort of
materialized.
was gonna say there is a kind of default MFA question that gets asked to a painter. It's like, why do these need to be paintings?
Mm,
Or that, painting is somehow always already automatically a commodity. Well, good luck with
mhm,
that. Um,
Yeah. I just was gonna say that I'm a big fan of the artists run art schools.
mm,
I teach for the NYC Crit Club, which is, and they've started not just classes, but there's like year-long mentor kind of programs, which I've been doing. And it's just such a relief, to be honest, to teach for an artist run school. So, like the fact that you guys have been going for so long, it's really incredible. And that, we've been able to grow into the online, into the Zoom era, that it just fits so perfectly. And
mm.
um, I'm all for it.
Thank you. I will just say to everyone that there's the Q&A feature. So if you've got a question, type it into the Q&A. So some questions have come in, but the chat is disabled because it's a webinar. So if you've got any questions, just put them into the Q&A.
I also want to say to that first question, there are a lot of we see shows and we go to our peer friends' studios. So I do see a lot of contemporary painting, and like names are not coming to me right now, but I love the kind of painting community, the painting world that we're in. But when I'm in my studio, I'm thinking about like Fra Angelico and Botticelli, and I'm thinking about the history of drawing in botany and in scientific illustration going back, centuries. And there's so many, weird tangents that one can go down in the studio that we're not. I'm not always thinking about like, oh, right, I mean, I'm on a floor with these
Mm,
wonderful painters whose work I really admire, but I'm not going to go, I don't even talk to them. I don't even say, I'm like, hi, I got to go to the bathroom. I feel like I'm in my own weird portal to the dead.
yeah, I mean, I think that must be a universal phenomena. I think every studio complex I've ever been in or that I ever chat to anyone about is the same. And this idea of having this community on your doorstep of painters who you interact with, it just doesn't seem to ever happen for whatever
No,
reason.
it's never, yeah. I mean, I love that they're there.
well, that's what I
And
was gonna say.
we'll,
It's like a, it's
Um,
like it's a community that functions best as a theoretical one.
mm,
yeah,
It never actually fleshes out. But I mean, what about like Instagram?
mm,
I mean, I know kind of every morning I'll do a scroll and I'll post things and I feel like I'm aware of what people are doing through their feeds on Instagram. So that's cool. But on the negative side, it's like, holy shit, every possible idiom and sub-idiom and curiosity and subject matter is being mined by somebody.
mm.
So then how precious is one's own kind of uh, idiosyncratic enthusiasms in the face of like this tide of like everythingness.
you guys, I'm sorry, I'm just looking at the Q&A and I see a question from Tom Burkhardt. Do you ever have competitive feelings within your painter's marriage? It seems pretty healthy to us. That is the funniest question. Yeah, we have competitive vibes, but that's good. It'll be like, wait a second. What
No, I was
happened?
gonna
What? What?
I was gonna say I have a competitive vibe with Tom Burkhardt, who's
Yeah,
like
we're
one of the most
competitive.
amazing painters. Like, fuck you, man. Why are you so good?
I mean, a little healthy competition keeps you interested, keeps you pushing yourself. It's
Is that
there's
why the
painting and
well,
tennis,
that's what I
and
was going to say. Is that why you play tennis? Because some of that competitiveness can manifest on the tennis court.
Yeah, it's healthier on the court. You
Yeah.
know, you can actually like win at a tennis game. You can't really win art. At least I can't.
I see
Uh,
a question here from
there's
Jennifer
quite a few
Coates.
questions coming in, so we'll quickly run through them. Are you in the studio every day during a working week? Do you have a particular routine or pattern or habits?
Yeah, I would say we're there every day. My favorite day is if I can wake up really early, have a few minutes to kind of, meditate or something, and if I can get to my studio while it's still dark in the
Mm.
early mornings, I am the happiest person in the world. I'm not an evening worker. I'm like the person who likes the quiet of the really early morning. That's my ideal routine.
I find that I have to work through, and I usually do it by means of taking care of all my responsibilities, my correspondence, things that I don't want to do first, and then I'm faced with all the things that I'm working on. But there's a little bit of a moment in which I wonder, what, how does this matter? I can't believe I've spent my whole life making one painting after the other for decade after decade, and I've made plenty. Why do we need another one? And then I'll kind of tiptoe in and start working on something, and then I'm all in again. I mean, it's this
That's,
kind of
that's
strange
part of
process.
the That's part of the daily experience. We have to go through that every day. Like, what am I doing? This feels really hard. Do I really have to like put paint on the palette? Do I really have to pick up the brush today? And you just propel yourself through this strange like doubt. And, maybe this is betraying a secret, David Humphrey, but um, David's mother recently died, and a few days before she died, he had the most amazing like dream visitation from his mom. And I thought that was, and you said to her, like, cry the heart. Why have I spent my whole life doing this, painting after painting? And she goes, it's just play. And I love that so much. That is like the best message.
Well, that's cool, and it's true. I mean, play. The condition of play is so maybe one of the most profound things about being human. I mean, this is the level on which we connect to our little 3-year-old granddaughter, and maybe, it has a kind of I don't know, very deep neurophysical, metaphysical dimension.
Yeah, I mean, come on, we're so lucky as artists to know that like we have a place to go to make a mess. Our 3-year-old granddaughter's like, what? I can just spill paint in here? Are you really? It's okay. And to sit with all of the uncomfortable feelings and to have a practice of, moving through that murky doubt, the cloud of murky doubt, and to just kind of go, all right, I don't know what kind of world we live in, but I'm just going to sit with my discomfort and make something. And that's like, really, we're so lucky, all of us.
Well, there's a question that's come in from someone asking about the American art market and what is it like just now, and whether it feels healthy or whether it's a bit of a slump, or whether that even, is that something that you feel impacts you or what happens in the studio?
I mean, the chatter is that it's slumpy.
Hmm.
It's a bit slumpy, but it's happened before. Slumps happen and we keep going. Sorry, David, go ahead.
No, no, it goes up and down. And, we had the kind of the market crash of '09, and my God, it just came roaring back. And I guess maybe a lot of it depends on what you mean by health. I mean, to me, like an overheated, febrile, kind of insanely inflated market is not
Not
healthy.
healthy.
That,
Right.
that just looks makes sense, or evenly. Like you've got a kind of uh, a sort of a buy, a sort of high-end buy algorithm, that selects for certain careers. So I don't know if that's healthy,
Hmm.
because the thing that feels healthy to me is like what happens at the level of community, like artists run exhibitions, galleries that care about their artists kind of interacting with each other, the works are talking to each other, and that there's sort of enough sales to people who care about it to kind of sustain that group. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, it might be. I don't know what to wish for.
I just
I mean, I
wish
don't.
for like that rope. I feel like I'm always rope swinging. Like, all right, I got one rope. No,
Hmm.
like I hope the next rope comes. And that's how it is for me. Like I've got what's coming up next. Hopefully something comes after that, and hopefully I can, sell a little work, make my studio rent. We just kind of trundle along.
That's the low bar expectation, which I have, which is that you have a show and that earns you a pass to another show, and that
That's
and that these line up across time so that you have a kind of oxygenated and kind of vital um, kind of life.
so you're not backed up. And if you're backed up, then you have the plumber's number from your studio for your training.
Oh well, I thought you were going to go medical on it, and you take the laxative.
Yeah.
Couple of more questions, and then we can wrap up because I realize that that's an hour and a half. Have you discovered any strange things happening with your mediums that you use that help to create reference to toxicity in the world? So I suppose that's could be to both of you, but I suppose it's maybe more to you, Jennifer.
Wait, read that one more time. I'm sorry. Let me
Have you
absorb
discovered
that.
any strange things happening with the mediums that you use that create a kind of reference to toxicity?
Well, I mean, I love to learn about my materials. So I'm not sure that this will answer the question, but when I learn about where the chemicals, what the origin story is of the chemicals that go into my pigments, that is really interesting to me because it's like the 19th century, there was a lot of experimentation in synthetic chemistry into the runoff from coal tar factories. So you had this sludgy kind of pollution runoff, and it turned out to be a source of tens of thousands of useful synthetic chemicals. So like makeup, pesticides, dyes, medicine, all kinds of things. And the dye industry, innovations in the dye industry in the mid 19th century spurred this kind of rainbow of synthetic colors. And my engagement with acrylic paint and spray paint, I just think that's really fascinating, like the way that came to me through industry and through the alchemy of turning coal tar, black, smelly sludge into a rainbow of Skittle colored fruit flavors, a rainbow. So that's how it speaks to me. The toxicity comes through the artificial colors that I try to heighten. How about you, Humphrey?
Well, I would say not. I think about the liquidity of paint and the paradox of looking at a finished artwork that was once wet and now it's dry. Now, that doesn't intersect with toxicity so much, but it does have a beautiful temporality, and that the capacity of liquids to dissolve boundaries between things. I like to thematize in the work. So as far as toxicity goes, that I would say is more cognitive, more at the level of thinking, toxic thought, than anything that emerges from consideration of the materials.
You're just a toxic person.
That's what I'm saying.
it's not a question as such, it's more of a comment or a statement, and it goes back to maybe what we were talking about earlier in the conversation about a space for painters, and perhaps Turps fills that space to some degree. So this is someone saying that they are a final year art undergrad student, painter and drawer, and they've been disappointed at the lack of interest from their tutors, even though there's a growing number of painters amongst them. They're not blaming the tutors because they're so time pressed, with the number of students increasing year in year and the number of staff reducing. So I mean, do you have any, is there maybe, I will rephrase that as a question in terms of if someone is in that situation, what would you advise them to maybe do as someone who's interested in painting? They are actually in an institution, but they're not getting what they think they need. Is there something
They're
that they
being
need to
underserved. Well, for one thing, they're the customer, they're paying.
do?
So, their faculty are the kind of, performing monkeys, they're clowns. They should you should get their money's worth. Okay, there's
Yeah.
that. But
Yes.
that doesn't change anything. I would say like self-organization is the royal road to getting a kind of conversation that you want to have about your work. Your peers are probably capable collectively of generating every possible perspective on what you're doing, as negative, positive, helpful, irrelevant. I mean, the thing is about teachers and art schools is that a lot of times what you hear is totally pointless, but
Or
you
subjective,
are
just
subjective.
extremely subjective. Yeah.
But that in your navigation of that, you come up with the thing that matters.
Yeah. I think, okay, number one is whoever asked that question is industrious enough to decide they want to come to a lecture of a couple of jokers from, New York City. Like that suggests some resilience and creativity and like just keep doing things like that. And I agree with David that the organizing student, get together with your friends and have a monthly crit group or something like that. I learned more from my fellow students in grad school than I ever did from any of from my teachers.
Mm.
And I think, that's how it should be. I think the students you can learn from each other, and just being a little voracious about like, all right, I'm not getting what I want here, but go to the lectures, you're doing it already by being here.
I mean, undergrad is a little different. I mean, grad school, I think of as a social experiment, and that even the top grad schools present themselves as having a program, but there's not really a program. It's a kind of a turbulence of conversation,
Opinion.
opinion, with some scholarship. I totally believe in the idea that art making is a kind of another branch of the humanities, that we are in the business of contributing to discourse and history and knowledge by these in this peculiar language, but that kind of idea that the institution of learning in an art context is a social experiment, and you have more power than you think, probably.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I am, in fact, in about 1 hour, I'm going to meet 3 painter friends. And we get together like every now and then and visit each other's studios. So they're going to come to my studio, and I'm going to see a friend down the hall that I have to make an appointment with because we don't want to chat when we bump into each other. But that kind of thing is great. Trusted people come to the studio, give feedback. Yeah.
I think that's everything. There is one more question that I did miss. Apologies. What do you want people to think when they first see your pictures? Or
You want them to think like, oh my fucking God, what the fuck is that?
That's what I want. I want them to be like, oh my my God, whoa, like, where am I? I want to keep looking at this. That's really what I want. I want them to say, I want to I want to look at this for a while. That's what I would like.
Same for you,
There it
David.
is. Share that, Jennifer Coates, you and I.
Well, I think this is a good point to wrap up. Well, before I just want to, David, give your podcast. You have a podcast.
I do have a podcast, but I've been putting it out as it's an archive, really from like the zeros. And so
Okay,
I've been
yeah.
putting it out. I'm reaching the end of my archive, and so I'm stalking some new material, and I'm sure I will continue. It was called Sound and Vision, and WPS1 had a radio station, and I did it on that radio station. Then a guy called Brian Alfred took the name, and he's been doing a podcast called Sound and Vision, interviewing artists and talking about music. So whatever, he's a nice guy. I don't think he knew that he was stealing
Mm.
my name.
I
So
don't think he knew. Let's not malign him because it's a great podcast. I don't think he knew.
yeah, no, I'm not maligning him, but now I don't have that name anymore, and so I call it just David Humphrey's Radio Show. But it will continue. You can find it on Spotify.
Mm.
I think it's on Apple Music too.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it did, is it David Humphrey's radio show 2004 to 2008, and I wasn't sure if it was a historical thing or if this was just you somehow a sort of witty
I'm
title.
doing my I'm doing my anachronic,
Yeah.
no, but the new ones will be coming in the
Okay,
next year.
fantastic. I'll listen out for that. Well, I would just want to say a massive thank you to you both for taking the time to be here this evening for me in London, this afternoon for you. I think there was a lot of interesting material that was covered. I've written down all these terms that I never knew before, like nectropastoral and edge effects and ecotone. So yeah, a lot to think about. And yes, thank you for being so generous with your time. We really appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Hooray for Turps Banana.
thank you. Speak to you both soon, hopefully.
Bye.